She never meant for anyone to hear it. That trembling confession in the dim elevator, a secret carried for 38 years. I've never been touched by someone who cared. Most people hide their deepest wounds in quiet places. Most people pray those wounds stay hidden. But fate, it has a way of choosing the worst possible moment to expose us. Because she wasn't alone. A man stood in the shadows, powerful, poised, and listening. The CEO. The one person whose world should never collide with hers. And when the doors finally opened, he didn't walk out. He cleared his entire day. Every meeting. Every obligation. Because something in her pain stopped him cold. What she doesn't know yet is this. Sometimes the moment that breaks you is the same moment that saves you. Stay with me. This story begins with a confession and ends with a twist neither of them ever saw coming. The building was finally quiet, but Hannah Miller could still feel the chaos buzzing under her skin. The elevator doors slid open with a tired groan, as if even the machinery had suffered through the same long, miserable day she had. She stepped inside and let her shoulders sag for the first time in hours, the steel-toe boots on her feet feeling like they were made of cement. The oversized hoodie she'd thrown over her work clothes still smelled faintly of dust and bleach, a reminder of the burst pipe on the 17th floor and everything else that had gone wrong. It was nearly 7:30 in the evening. The Cincinnati sky outside the narrow window was fading into a murky blue, and the whole tower felt hollowed out, emptied of its daytime urgency. Hannah wished she could empty herself out as easily. She pressed the lobby button, slipped her earbuds in, and exhaled slowly. The kind of exhale that tries to drain out frustration but only manages to make space for more of it. Her phone vibrated. Lily. "Hey," Hannah said softly once the call connected. "You free?" "I've been waiting for you to call," Lily replied. "Don't tell me you bailed on the date again." Hannah closed her eyes. She leaned against the elevator wall, letting the cool metal ground her for a moment. "I canceled," she whispered. "Again." "Oh, Hannah. I know. Her voice cracked around the edges. "But I just couldn't do it tonight." The elevator hummed as it descended, and Hannah rubbed her forehead with the back of her wrist, smudging a streak of dust across her skin. Lily sighed. "What scared you this time?" He seemed nice. "It's not them," Hannah said quietly. "It's me." Silence stretched thin between them. "I can't keep pretending I'm like everyone else," Hannah finally said. "I'm 38, and I'm still—" Her voice faltered. "I'm still a virgin, Lil." She said it like a confession no one else in the world was allowed to hear. The elevator lights flickered once, then steadied. "I feel defective," she whispered. "Like something's wrong with me. Everyone else seems to get the rhythm of dating and intimacy, and I just—" She let out a shaky breath. "I missed the whole memo. Hannah, I'm serious. I feel left behind. Like I'm invisible to men unless they need something." The words tumbled out now, worn smooth by years of being stored too tightly. "I spent my 20s taking care of Dad after Mom died, my 30s trying to escape Mark's grip. 10 years of a man telling me who I should be, what I owed him, how I wasn't trying hard enough to make the relationship normal. I wasted so much time being afraid of disappointing someone." She swallowed hard. The elevator bumped lightly, and she steadied herself with a hand on the railing. "I don't want my first time to be with someone who treats me like I'm a project," she said softly. The truth echoed in the small metal box. Not bitter. Not dramatic. Just tired. She ended the call with a quick, shaky laugh, promising Lily she'd call when she got home. She wiped under her eyes with her wrist, straightened her hoodie, and tried to gather herself. The elevator jerked hard enough to make her gasp. Then it came to a dead stop between floors, a whine of machinery. Darkness for half a heartbeat. Then dim emergency lights washed the space in a dull amber glow. Hannah pressed the emergency call button. "Not tonight," she muttered. "Please. Not tonight." Then, a voice from behind her. A deep, calm, unmistakably adult male voice. "Are you all right, Miss Miller?" Hannah's breath snagged. She spun around so fast her earbuds flew out. There, in the far corner of the elevator, leaning on a sleek black briefcase as if he'd been waiting for the right time to reveal himself, stood Cole Harrington. She recognized him instantly. Everyone in the building did. The quiet, private, maddeningly composed CEO of Harrington Dynamics, her building's biggest tenant, and a man whose face had been on local business magazines for years. He was the sort of person you didn't accidentally run into, much less accidentally confess your deepest, most humiliating secret in front of. He had been there, the whole time, listening. Heat surged up Hannah's neck, flooding her cheeks, her ears, even her scalp. "Oh God," she whispered. Her fingers curled against her palms as if she could claw her way out of her own skin. Cole didn't move closer. He didn't smirk. He didn't pretend he hadn't heard. He simply met her eyes with a kind of steady attention that felt more intimate than anything she'd said on the phone. His expression wasn't mocking or pitying, just painfully, devastatingly human. He reached out and gently tapped the emergency call button again, as if giving her something neutral to focus on. And then, in a voice low enough to soften the edges of her panic, he said, "For what it's worth, you're not defective." The words hung there, heavy, tender, impossible to absorb all at once. Hannah stood frozen, her heart pounding like it was trying to break out of her ribcage. The dim light caught the faint silvering at his temples. The loosened tie, the exhaustion that mirrored her own, and the sincerity in his eyes. She didn't know what terrified her more, that he'd heard everything, or that he meant what he'd just said. The elevator stayed silent around them, holding its breath. And somewhere inside her, a different kind of panic began to rise, one she couldn't name yet. But she knew this moment wasn't over. And nothing about her life would be quite the same after it. The elevator stayed frozen between floors, humming faintly like it was thinking about moving but had no real intention of doing so. Hannah's heartbeat thudded louder than the machinery. She clicked her radio on with a trembling thumb, relieved she had at least one piece of equipment that still obeyed her. "Control, this is Hannah on elevator 3, she said, forcing her voice into something resembling professionalism. Car stopped between 11 and 12. 2 occupants, requesting assistance. Static crackled, followed by a weary voice she recognized from the night shift. "Copy that, Hannah. We're short-staffed tonight. The tech's on another call, might be at least 30 minutes. 10-4, she replied, though her stomach twisted. 30 minutes. With him. She clipped the radio back on her belt and suddenly became hyper-aware of her hoodie. The dust streaks across her sleeves, the tired knot of hair at the back of her head. All this time, she thought she was alone. Talking freely. Confessing freely. Now she was trapped with the one person she never would have let see even a crack in her armor. I'm so sorry you had to hear all that," she murmured, eyes fixed on the elevator buttons. Silence followed. Thick. Warm. Unbearable. Cole Harrington shifted slightly, setting his briefcase down before lowering himself to sit on the floor like he'd just decided to wait for a bus. The contrast was almost absurd, this immaculate CEO in a custom suit, tie loosened, back against a faded metal wall. He gestured toward the floor across from him. "We're stuck here anyway," he said. "Might as well sit like human beings." She blinked. I'm fine standing." "You're shaking," he said gently. Hannah's eyes darted down to her own hands. They were trembling, though she tried to hide them by curling her fingers inward. She sighed, defeated, and slid down the opposite wall. The cool tile steadied her back. Her boots stretched out a little too far into the space between them, so she drew her knees up self-consciously. Cole didn't comment on it. He didn't comment on anything she feared he would. Instead he asked, "Did your day get any better after the pipe burst?" Her head snapped up. "You knew about that?" He nodded. "Saw you on the security feed. You handled it well." Hannah's mouth opened slightly. "Wait, you were watching me?" "No," he said with a faint smile. "Not watching, I just get alerts when major issues happen on floors my company occupies. The cameras popped up on my screen when the flooding hit the hallway." She wasn't sure whether to be flattered or horrified. She settled for embarrassed. I looked like a mess, she muttered. I saw someone who stayed calm when everyone else panicked, he replied. That's rare. The sincerity caught her off guard. She pulled on a loose string at the cuff of her hoodie, trying to disguise how those words warmed her more than they should have. Cole leaned his head back against the wall and exhaled, the sound more tired than anything. You mentioned your dad, he said carefully. That must be a lot to carry alone. The gentleness in his voice made her chest tighten. She wasn't used to being asked about her life without someone wanting something in return. It's been hard, she admitted. He didn't interrupt, didn't pity her, he simply listened. After a moment, he spoke. I understand the feeling. She raised an eyebrow. You? The man with the corner office and a staff of 200? My office is big, he said, but it's very quiet, too quiet. He rubbed a hand over his jaw, shadows deepening along the line of his cheekbones. I'm divorced, he said. Been a few years now. Hannah blinked at the unexpected honesty. And I live alone in a 4,000-square-foot condo filled with more screens than people. My brother struggled with addiction. Money didn't help him any more than it saved my marriage. Something in his voice carried a weight she recognized, a loneliness that matched her own in shape, if not in story. She nodded. I'm sorry. So am I, he murmured. He reached for something in his jacket pocket, a phone silenced the entire time. He glanced at it briefly and then put it away. I was supposed to be at a dinner with investors tonight, he said casually. Oh, she replied, you should call them, let them know you're stuck. He shrugged. They'll live. The elevator hummed and clicked, but didn't move. Right now, he added, looking directly at her, I'm more concerned about the woman who thinks she's broken because she has standards. Her breath caught. The words landed softer than silk, but hit harder than any blow. For the first time since she realized he'd overheard her confession, Hannah laughed small, embarrassed, but real. Don't flatter me, she said, cheeks warming. I'm not flattering you, he replied. I'm stating a fact. The air between them shifted, still awkward, but no longer sharp. Something gentle had replaced the panic, something fragile, but unmistakably human. Minutes passed quietly as they waited, the dim emergency light softening the tension. Hannah found herself studying the loosened tie, the creased sleeves, the exhaustion around Cole's eyes. He didn't look like a billionaire. He looked like a man who hadn't had a real conversation in a very long time. Just as she opened her mouth to ask him something, anything, the elevator lurched. A hard jolt, then a rising motion that made her brace her hand against the floor. Cole stood and offered his hand without hesitation. She hesitated, then took it. His grip was warm, steady, grounding. When this door opens, he said quietly, people will see the CEO and the building lady. He paused. But up here? It's just two tired souls trying to remember how to be human. Before she could respond, the doors slid open to a cluster of maintenance workers and security guards. Their expressions were half relieved, half curious. Cole glanced at her ID badge, meeting her eyes in a way that made her pulse skip. Good night, Hannah Miller, he said, stepping out first. But before he merged into the hallway light, he looked back once, just once, his expression unreadable, and somehow that was the part that left her breathless. Morning light slid between the blinds of Hannah's apartment like it was tiptoeing in, unsure whether to wake her. She'd barely slept. Every time she shut her eyes, she saw the amber glow of the emergency lights. Saw Cole Harrington sitting on the elevator floor as if he belonged nowhere else. Heard his quiet voice saying she wasn't defective. Hannah buried her face in her pillow and groaned. Why did he have to hear all that? There was no answer, of course. Just the small apartment humming around her, radiator clicking, refrigerator buzzing, a life built on routine and control, a life she understood, unlike whatever last night had been. She pushed herself up, tied her hair back, and moved through her morning motions like someone walking through an old photograph. Shower, coffee, work boots, hoodie, and then the 10-minute walk to the office tower that had become her second home and second battlefield. By the time she reached the facilities office, she had convinced herself of one truth. It meant nothing. He probably already forgot. He was a CEO. He lived in a world 10 floors above hers, literally and figuratively. Hannah threw herself into tasks, writing reports, checking overnight maintenance logs, rerouting a pest control request. Anything to scrub the memory of last night out of her mind. But meanwhile, several stories above her, a very different morning was unfolding. At the top floor of Harrington Dynamics, Cole stood before a wall-sized digital schedule. Meetings stacked edge to edge. Investor calls, product reviews, PR check-ins, staff briefings, a breakfast with a venture partner. "Good morning, Mr. Harrington," said Brianna, his assistant, sharp suit, sharper mind, tablet in hand. I know. He didn't take his eyes off the screen. Truth was, he hadn't slept much either. Every time he drifted off, he saw Hannah's face lit by that dim safety bulb, raw, tired, painfully honest. Her confession wasn't what stayed with him. It was the courage of it. The humanness. Brianna continued. "Your investor meeting at 8 should only take clear the morning." She blinked. "Sir? And push the investor meeting to tomorrow. Any briefings, move them to this afternoon." Brianna stared as though he'd spoken another language. "Sir, you've never postponed investor calls." "Today I am." He turned away from the screen. "Please make the adjustments." She opened her mouth as if to object, then thought better of it and scribbled rapidly on her tablet. "I'll notify the teams." Cole nodded once and walked toward the elevator, the same one that had trapped him the night before. When the doors closed, he listened to the familiar hum of cables and motors with a new awareness. As if the machinery still echoed the conversation he wasn't supposed to hear. He didn't fully understand why he was doing this. He only knew that something about Hannah had unsettled him in a way that felt inconvenient but strangely right. Down in the facilities wing, the building manager, Frank, nearly tripped over a box of filters when he saw Cole appear in the doorway. "Mr. Harrington, is something wrong on your floors?" "No," Cole said calmly. "I'm looking for Hannah Miller." Frank's eyes widened in immediate panic, like he was bracing for a lawsuit. Was it about last night?" "She radioed in the elevator issue." "It's nothing like that," Cole said. "I simply need a word with her." "In private." Frank blinked several times, then pointed toward the small break room near the back. "She's in there, finishing reports." "Sir." Cole thanked him and stepped inside. Hannah was sitting at the scarred break room table, typing on her laptop with her foot tapping a restless rhythm against the floor. When she looked up and saw him in the doorway, her whole body went still. "Mr. Harrington," she said carefully. "Is something wrong?" "No." He closed the door behind him, giving them privacy. "And please call me Cole." She swallowed, adrenaline flickering across her face. "If this is about last night, I swear." "It is," he interrupted. "But not for the reasons you think." Her fingers curled slightly on the edge of her laptop. Cole pulled out the chair across from her, but didn't sit until she nodded stiffly. When he did, he leaned forward, with his forearms resting lightly on the table. No briefcase, no phone, no CEO persona. "First," he said, "I owe you an apology." She blinked. "For what?" "For being an unintended eavesdropper." Her breath eased just slightly. "Thank you. And second," he continued, "I wanted to check on you. After the day you had. After everything you shared." She stiffened again. "You canceled your meetings for that?" "Yes." Her jaw dropped, not dramatically, but in that quiet, disbelief-soaked way of someone who knows the weight of time in corporate life. "I didn't need those meetings as much as I needed to make sure you were all right," he said simply. Hannah sat back, stunned. "Why?" "I'm just the building operations person." "You're someone who had a hard day," he said. "Someone who deserves concern." That's enough. She wasn't sure what to do with the warmth rising in her chest. It felt dangerous. Like standing too close to a door she wasn't sure she wanted opened. Cole glanced at the clock. "Do you get a break soon?" "In about 15 minutes, she murmured. "There's a diner across the street," he said. "Strobel's. They make terrible coffee and excellent pancakes." She stared at him. "Are you inviting me to breakfast?" "A coffee," he corrected. "One coffee. Nothing more. Not CEO to employee." just two people who survived a stuck elevator together. She searched his face for any hint of pressure, expectation, or pity. But he sat there, composed, simply present. She took a breath. One coffee. His posture softened with what might have been relief. But, she added, lifting a finger, no dating, no flirting, no. I fully agree, he said. Just coffee. She nodded slowly, still unsure whether she was stepping into something safe or something reckless, yet unable to ignore the small tug in her chest that told her she wanted to know what came next. Outside the break room window, the winter sun edged higher, turning the glass a faint amber. Cole stood, offering a quiet smile that didn't quite reach his eyes but almost did. I'll be downstairs, he said. Whenever your break starts. He left with the same steady steps he'd entered with, the door clicking shut behind him. Hannah stared at the empty chair across from her. For the first time all morning, her heart wasn't pounding from panic. It was pounding because something unexpected had just begun, and she didn't know whether to run from it or toward it. The bell above the diner door gave a tired little jingle as Hannah stepped inside. Warm light pooled over the scuffed linoleum floors, and the smell of burnt coffee and butter hung in the air, the kind of place where time softened around the edges. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't even particularly clean. But it felt human in a way. The glass and steel tower across the street never quite did. Cole was already there, sitting in a corner booth. He'd chosen the side that faced the entrance, thoughtful, she noticed. His suit jacket was folded beside him, and he'd rolled up his sleeves, revealing a watch worn down at the leather strap. He looked more like a tired man grabbing breakfast than a CEO who could be in a penthouse boardroom instead. Hannah tugged at her work polo. It smelled faintly of cleaning solvent, dust, and the lingering metallic scent from the utility room she'd just inspected. She wished she'd had time to wash her hands again. But her break was short, and her nerves were shorter. Cole stood as she approached. "Morning," he said softly. She nodded. "Morning." He waited until she sat before taking his seat again. A server dropped off 2 mismatched mugs and filled them with coffee the color of mud. Steam curled up like a small invitation. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Hannah finally wrapped both hands around her mug and said, "So, this is weird." Cole smiled faintly. "It is, but not unpleasant." She let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. The diner clattered around them, plates tapping, conversations rising and falling, the hiss of a griddle heating up again. Yet somehow the booth felt like a bubble, a small pocket of quiet where neither of them had to pretend. She took a sip of the bitter coffee and cleared her throat. "You wanted to check if I was okay." "You wanted to check if I was okay." "I did. Why?" Her voice was careful, not accusatory, just uncertain. "Because last night sounded like it wasn't the first time you felt alone," he said. The honesty threw her off. She blinked, looked down at her cup, and then, because hiding wasn't going to help, she exhaled and let the words come. "You asked last night why I'm still." She swallowed. "It's not because I think there's something noble about it." Cole didn't interrupt. He didn't shift. He just listened. "It started with my ex-fiancé," she said quietly. "Mark, we were together 4 years, engaged for the last one, and the whole time he kept telling me I was too uptight, too repressed, too difficult." Her fingers tightened around her mug. "He pushed, hard, and every time I said no, he'd make me feel like I was the unreasonable one. Eventually I just shut down. I stopped trusting my own instincts." Cole's jaw flexed, but he stayed silent, letting her continue at her own pace. "And before him," she said, "I grew up in a church that talked about intimacy like something to be terrified of, punished for. It wasn't holy, it was shame wearing a scripture mask. So even when I wanted to feel close to someone, fear swallowed it." She paused. The diner noise filled the space gently, like a soft breath. "And then Dad got sick, early dementia. I moved back home, drove him to appointments, helped him shower some days, sat with him through nights he didn't know my name." Her voice wavered. When you've been someone's caretaker long enough, you forget how to be anything else. Cole's eyes softened. That's a lot to carry. It was, she whispered. And dating, being vulnerable, it just felt like one more place I was already behind. Like everyone else got a head start. She looked up then, bracing for pity. But Cole didn't pity her. He looked at her like someone recognizing an ache he understood. My marriage ended, he said quietly, because I didn't know how to be present. Even when I was standing in the same room. She blinked. You? My ex-wife used to say I lived in two dimensions, work and silence. He glanced down at his coffee. She wasn't wrong. He turned the mug slowly in his hands. I built a company before I ever built a life. And I told myself it was noble. That I was providing. That everything I missed, the dinners, the anniversaries, the lazy Sundays, was worth it. His voice strengthened only to break in a different place. It wasn't. She left. And I understood why. Hannah's chest tightened, not with sympathy, but with recognition. And my brother. Cole swallowed. He didn't speak for a moment. He battled addiction for years. I kept telling myself I'd help him when things slowed down at work. One more quarter. One more product launch. One more crisis. Her breath caught. He called me the night before he overdosed. Cole's voice was a whisper now. The diner noise fell away for a heartbeat. Hannah felt something inside her shift, an understanding knitting itself between them. I'm sorry, she said, and she meant it with an ache of her own. He nodded, not in acceptance, but in acknowledgement. They sat there in the small diner booth, two people carrying very different histories, yet somehow meeting in the middle where the wounds looked strangely alike. Cole set his mug down gently. You keep calling yourself inexperienced, he said. But all I hear is that you never settled for being used. Hannah's throat tightened. She shook her head. Please don't turn me into some purity story. I'm not a symbol, I'm just... Her voice dropped. I'm scared. That, he said simply, doesn't disqualify you from love. The words hovered between them, soft, steady, and terrifying. She looked away first, the weight of his sincerity almost too much to sit with. Outside the diner window, traffic rolled past, headlights flickering like small promises she didn't yet know how to trust. And Cole, watching her carefully, didn't push, didn't fill the silence, didn't demand anything of her heart. He just waited, the way no one ever had. Hannah took a slow breath, trying to steady the tremor running through her chest. She wasn't ready to move forward. But for the first time in a long time, she wasn't ready to run either. Over the next week, Hannah found herself moving through the building with an awareness she didn't want to acknowledge. Every time she rounded a corner, she half expected to see Cole Harrington, and more than once, she actually did. Not in the sleek top-floor conference rooms where he belonged, but on stairwells. Yes, stairwells. The first time, she nearly collided with him on the 11th floor landing. He held a to-go cup and looked mildly out of breath. Morning, Hannah, he said, adjusting his grip on the railing. She raised an eyebrow. You know there's an elevator, right? He straightened his tie, something he did more often when he was trying not to smile. She snorted. You climbed 11 floors because you're cautious? 8, he corrected. I started from the 9th. Don't give me too much credit. That earned him a reluctant laugh. A small one, but real. He didn't linger, didn't flirt, didn't turn the interaction into anything it wasn't. He just nodded and continued upward, footsteps light on the concrete steps. And somehow, that little moment stayed with her the entire day. It became a pattern after that. Sometimes she'd see him heading down the stairs as she carried a toolbox. Other times, she'd catch him holding a door for a delivery driver, or walking the long way around the lobby instead of taking the private elevator he usually used. Each time, he greeted her the same way, quietly, like they were sharing a small secret neither of them had agreed upon yet. She kept telling herself it meant nothing. She kept telling herself she wasn't letting anything start, but the softness between them grew anyway, like grass pushing through cracks in concrete. The following Saturday, Hannah drove to the community center on Riverbend Street, same as she did every week. She liked the routine rolling carts of books for the seniors' reading club, setting up long tables, listening to Mr. Lawson's stories about the Korean War for the 1000th time. It grounded her. She was rummaging through a closet for extra folding chairs when she heard murmuring behind her. She turned and nearly dropped the stack in her hands. Cole stood in the doorway. In jeans, a flannel shirt, hands awkwardly shoved in his pockets, like a kid unsure of the right classroom. "What are you doing here?" she blurted. He held up a grocery bag as if it were a shield. "I, brought donuts." She blinked. "Why? You mentioned you volunteer here." He shrugged. "I had a free Saturday." She stared. "You canceled investor meetings all week, and you're telling me you have a free Saturday?" Something flickered in his expression, humor mixed with something deeper. Before she could respond, Mrs. Hargrove, an 80-year-old force of nature, shuffled over and tapped Hannah's elbow. "Sweetheart," she whispered loudly, "is that the tall one with the kind eyes you told us about?" Hannah's soul exited her body. I didn't, Mrs. Hargrove, but it was too late." Other seniors turned to look. Some waved at Cole. One old man lifted a thumb in approval. Cole, mortifyingly unbothered, smiled politely and said, "Good morning." Mrs. Hargrove leaned toward him. "Young man, you don't have to stand there. Grab some chairs. Make yourself useful." He obeyed immediately, far too immediately, nearly tripping, as he reached for a stack of chairs that were definitely heavier than he expected. Hannah rushed over and grabbed the opposite end. "You're going to throw out your back." "I'll die with dignity," he said through the strain. "You'll die because you don't know how to lift properly," she shot back. Some of the seniors chuckled openly. Once the chairs were set up, Hannah pulled him aside toward a quiet corner near the bulletin board. "This is not okay," she said in a low voice. His brows lifted. "Did I overstep?" "Yes. No. I don't know." She took a breath. "Cole, people are going to think that I'm trying to—" He waited. "That I'm sleeping my way into a better life," she finished. His expression softened instantly. Not pity, understanding. "Hannah, I'm not here to make a spectacle of us," he said gently. "There is no us," she shot back, then winced at her own sharpness. He nodded slowly. "All right. Then think of this as me being part of something that matters to you." "That's exactly the problem," she whispered. "I'm proud of this work. I'm proud of earning my life. I don't want people thinking I'm being rescued." "I'm not walking into your world to rescue you," he said quietly. Nothing about his tone tried to make the moment smaller than it was. "I'm walking in because mine is too quiet without you." Her breath stilled. "No," she whispered. "Don't say things like that." "Why not?" "Because I don't know what to do with them." He nodded once, accepting the boundary without pushing against it. "Then do nothing with them," he said. She looked away, pretending to study a row of posters on the wall. But every nerve in her body was painfully aware of him, of the sincerity, the restraint, the way he made space instead of demands. Mrs. Hargrove called for help setting up the reading stand, and Cole walked away to assist, giving Hannah room to breathe. She watched him from across the room, awkwardly holding a stack of books, offering a chair to someone who slapped his hand playfully and told him she wasn't that old. The strangest thing happened in that moment. For the first time in years, Hannah felt something warm flicker beneath the weight she carried. Not lust, not romance, not even hope, just possibility. Dangerous, unfamiliar, but alive. She tightened her ponytail, trying to get her bearings. She wasn't ready for his world. She wasn't even sure she was ready for her own heart. But as Cole laughed, truly laughed when Mr. Lawson told him a joke that made no sense, she realized something unsettling. She liked seeing him in her world. And that scared her more than anything. The false alarm sounded at 8:12 p.m. A shrill, metallic wail slicing through the building's concrete ribs. People poured down stairwells, annoyed but compliant, clutching laptops, handbags, vending machine snacks, and the exhaustion of a long weekday. Hannah was the last to leave the lobby, her radio hissing updates as she directed stragglers out. By the time she stepped into the cool evening air, the lot was scattered with tenants in loose clusters, murmuring and shaking their heads. False alarms weren't common, but they weren't unheard of either. Old wiring, temperamental sensors, a puff of dust in the wrong vent, anything could set it off. She checked her watch. The fire department had already cleared the lower floors. HVAC units still needed verifying, and that meant climbing to the roof. She grabbed her tool bag and headed for the service stairs. Halfway up, she heard someone calling her name. Hannah. She turned to see Cole jogging across the lot, his tie gone, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows, hair tousled by the breeze. She stopped, heart tightening in that frustrating way she tried to ignore. "What are you doing?" she called down. "Following you," he said simply. She sighed. "Of course you are." He caught up with her just as she pushed open the heavy rooftop door. And then the world opened. Cincinnati spread out in front of them. All warm golds and soft whites, a quilt of lights stretching along the Ohio River. The air held a crispness, maybe 60 degrees, cool enough to sting lightly at their cheeks. The wind hummed around the tall steel units. A few stray leaves scraped across the roof like small, wandering thoughts. Hannah set her tool bag down and checked the first control panel. Everything stable, nothing tripped. Cole stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, staring at the city. "Hard to believe we're standing above 500,000 people," he murmured. "All with their own storms." She glanced at him, startled by the sudden poetry. Then she turned away, checking the next panel more slowly than necessary. "Everything looks clear," she finally said. "Probably dust or a glitchy sensor." "Still," he said, "I'm glad you're here." She looked up sharply. "Why?" His answer was soft but immediate. "Because you always seem to know what to do," she scoffed. "You see me checking boxes on a screen. That's not exactly heroic." "That's not what I mean," he said, turning toward her fully. "You move through the world differently than anyone I know. You take responsibility seriously. You show up. You care, and most people—" She swallowed, unsure how to deflect that kind of sincerity. They walked toward the edge of the building, not close, just near enough to see the stretch of highway and blinking red aircraft lights marking the horizon. The wind lifted a loose strand of her hair, brushing it against her cheek. She tucked it behind her ear, trying to still the tremor in her hands. Cole leaned against the low barrier, gazing out. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't answer at first. Then very quietly she said, "Physical intimacy isn't the part that scares me." His brow furrowed, and he waited. "It's the emotional kind," she whispered. "The kind where someone sees you. All of you. That's the part I dodge. Because once someone sees your actual heart, they can crush it without even meaning to." He drew in a slow breath. "I get that." She turned toward him. "Do you?" His jaw tightened. "I don't trust myself not to screw things up when life gets stressful. I don't trust that I won't slip back into old patterns. Choosing work. Choosing distraction. Choosing the easy highway instead of the relationship that needs tending." Her heart ached at the honesty. No performance. No polished CEO veneer. Just a man admitting his flaws under the open sky. A gust of wind swept between them, cool, restless, carrying the faint scent of river water. Their eyes met in that wind-blurred moment, and something in the space between them changed. Gentled, tensed, tilted toward something inevitable. Cole shifted closer, slow enough for her to step away if she wanted. His voice dropped to something so careful it felt like a hand hovering near her cheek without touching. Hannah. Her name sounded different in the wind. Warmer. Fuller. He leaned in not enough to close the distance, just enough for a question to hang in the air. Her breath hitched. Her pulse thudded against her ribs. For a full second, she let herself imagine it, the warmth of his mouth, the softness of his hold, the unfamiliar but terrifying safety of wanting someone who wasn't going to push or pull or demand. But when he got close enough for his breath to brush her cheek, her body stiffened, not pulling away, but freezing, like someone bracing for impact. Cole saw it. He stopped instantly. Not a pause. A complete stillness, gentle, respectful, reading her without judgment. He drew back a few inches, eyes never leaving hers, voice quiet as a secret. "You said no pressure," he said. "And I meant it." She blinked, stunned by the restraint. "When you're ready," he added. "If you're ever ready." Her lips parted, but nothing came out. No one had ever given her the space to choose. No one had ever stepped back before guilt-tripping, sulking, or insisting. The wind tugged lightly at her sleeve. The city hummed beneath them like a steady heartbeat. She felt the absence of his closeness as sharply as she'd felt the presence of it. And for the first time, something inside her didn't collapse under fear. It softened. She let out a shaky breath. Cole stepped away, giving her back the sky, the rooftop, the room to breathe. But he didn't walk off. He stayed close by, just not close enough to overwhelm. Down below, the building reset to its familiar evening glow. Tenants returning inside. The moment had passed. But something had been planted. Quiet. Deep. Alive. Hannah touched the railing lightly, grounding herself. "Cole," she began. He turned toward her. But the words caught in her throat, too many emotions crowding the doorway at once. She wasn't ready to speak them yet. Maybe she'd be ready tomorrow. Or next week. Or someday. But not now. Not yet. By Tuesday morning, the building had turned into a whispering machine. Nothing loud. Nothing direct. Just the soft, poisonous kind of chatter that slithers under doors and slips through vents. Hannah felt it the moment she stepped into the staff corridor. 2 custodians went silent when they saw her. A maintenance tech gave her a look she couldn't quite read. Sympathy? Judgment? Curiosity? She didn't know. Didn't want to know. By noon, the whispers had sharpened into words. "That's why she got her schedule changed," someone muttered near the water cooler. "Wish I had a rich boyfriend to get me perks," another voice snickered. Hannah froze behind the corner, her coffee cooling in her hand. A familiar hollowness opened in her chest as if her ribs were widening just to give the shame more space. She walked away before they could notice her. She kept her chin up. She kept breathing. She kept doing the job she'd done for years. But inside, something was cracking. Cole noticed within hours. He found her near the fire control room, checking a malfunction log for the 3rd time, even though the system was fine. "You've been avoiding me," he said quietly. She didn't look up. "No, I've been working." "Hannah, I said I'm working." He stepped closer, but kept his distance. "Remembering the rooftop. Talk to me, please." She lifted her head then, and for the first time since he'd known her, he saw anger in those steady brown eyes. "You don't get to ask me to talk when the whole building is talking about me." He stiffened. "What do you mean?" She laughed short, humorless. "Rumors, Cole, whispers, people acting like I'm some woman sleeping her way into a nicer cleaning closet." His expression darkened. "Who said that?" "Does it matter?" she snapped. "It's happening." She pushed past him, but he followed, matching her pace. "Tell me what was said." "No," she said sharply. "Because the problem isn't them, it's this. You and me in hallways. You showing up at the community center. You climbing 11 flights of stairs just to say hello." His jaw pulled tight. He didn't deny any of it. "And now," she said, voice lowering, "HR wants to see me." The words landed between them with the weight of a stone. "When?" he asked. 2 o'clock. "I'll be there." "No," she said quickly, stepping back. "You absolutely will not." "Hannah, they called me to discuss power dynamics," she whispered. "Do you know what that means in HR language? It means I'm a liability. It means I'm the kind of woman they write cautionary memos about." He opened his mouth to protest, but she wasn't finished. "I worked too hard for this job to become a rumor in your world." Her voice broke around the last words. Cole inhaled slowly, as if pulling air into a chest suddenly too tight. "Then let me fix this." "You can't fix perception," she said. "Not in a building where your name is on an entire floor." Something pained flickered across his face. But before either of them could say more, her radio buzzed. HR was ready. The office was too bright. The chairs were too soft. The conversation, too polite. A woman named Darlene, with a calm voice and a clipboard, asked Hannah whether she felt pressured in any way. Whether she felt her job security was tied to any personal relationship with Mr. Harrington. Whether she understood company policy on fraternization. Each question felt like a needle sliding under her skin. "I'm not in a relationship with him," Hannah said finally, "and my job is my job. That's all." Darlene nodded without reacting. "Thank you for clarifying." Clarifying. As if rumors were facts needing correction. Hannah walked out numb. Cole was waiting by the service elevator, tie loosened, expression carved in tension. "What did they say?" "Nothing I didn't already know," she murmured. "They think I'm compromised." He swore under his breath. Not loudly. Just enough that she knew the anger wasn't at her, it was at a system he'd spent his whole life benefiting from, without ever realizing how it could hurt someone else. "I'll talk to HR," he said. "I'll remove myself from any decision involving you. I'll put it in writing." She stared at him. "I'll transfer you to another Harrington Dynamics building if that's safer," he continued. "Or I'll step back. Personally. Completely. If that's what protects you." Her throat tightened at the last part. Not from relief. From grief she hadn't earned yet. "Cole," she said softly. "Listen to me." He met her eyes. She had to swallow before she could get the words out. "I will not be the scandal that proves their worst assumptions about women here," she whispered. "I won't be the punchline. I won't be the warning story. If this becomes a circus, I walk. I mean it." His nostrils flared not in anger at her, but in helplessness. "We can't let them take your dignity from you," he said. "I can lose a job," she said, "but I cannot lose my sense of who I am." He shut his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, something was settled, painfully, but settled. "I'll go to HR," he said. "I'll formalize boundaries. Every communication between us documented. Transparent. Professional. No decisions about your role without a buffer team. No evaluations. No influence. Cole. It's the only way I can protect you without losing you completely." Her breath caught. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Not because she didn't want him, but because wanting him suddenly came with a cost she'd never imagined paying. He took a step back, as if giving her space to breathe through the thousand thoughts swirling in her head. For a moment, neither spoke, and the world felt suspended as if the rooftop wind had followed them down and was holding everything still. Hannah told him no the first time he asked. Straight out, no hesitation, just that familiar tightness in her chest and a firm shake of her head. "A gala?" she said, half laughing, half panicking. "Cole, I fix pipes and HVAC units. I don't attend things with chandeliers. It's a charity event," he said gently, "and you'd be with me." "That's the part that makes it worse," she fired back. He didn't argue. He just nodded once, stepping back the way he always did when she hit a boundary. But the invitation sat heavy on her shoulders all week. She tried ignoring it, tried burying herself in work, tried pretending the idea didn't make her stomach twist into knots. It wasn't until she told her sister Lily about it that everything unraveled. They were sitting at Hannah's tiny kitchen table, eating reheated lasagna from a foil pan. "You said no?" Lily asked, fork frozen midair. "Obviously I said no," Hannah replied. "Can you imagine me there? They'd smell the dust from my work boots through the carpet." "You wouldn't wear work boots," Lily said matter-of-factly. "That's not the point." Lily lowered her fork, eyes softening. "Han, you keep saying no to your life. To anything that scares you. To anything that might change something." Hannah looked away. "That's not fair." "Maybe not," Lily said. "But it's true." Hannah's throat tightened. Lily reached across the table, her voice gentling. "Maybe this is one yes you need." Hannah didn't answer. But that night, sitting alone on the edge of her bed, she stared at the text from Cole for a long time before typing back. "Okay, I'll go." The night of the gala, she wore a simple navy dress she'd bought on sale 3 years earlier. Elegant but understated. The kind of dress that said she was trying without pretending to be someone else. She curled her hair, applied minimal makeup, and slipped on low heels she prayed she wouldn't trip in. When she stepped into the lobby, she nearly turned around and left. Chandeliers glittered overhead like frozen fireworks. Servers glided through the space with silver trays. A jazz quartet played near the stage, the soft trumpet drifting like smoke through the crowd. People wore designer suits and gowns that shimmered under the lights. She felt like the only person without a spotlight. And then she saw Cole. He was standing by the entrance, talking with a board member. When he turned, his expression shifted instantly, like the world had paused just long enough for him to see her more clearly. He walked toward her, eyes warm. "You look perfect." She exhaled shakily. "I look like someone who should be fixing the lighting in here." "You look like yourself," he said softly. "That's all I want." He placed a hand near her back, not touching, just guiding, giving her the option to move away if she needed. She didn't. Inside the ballroom, the attention shifted toward him, the way planets tilt toward gravity. People came to shake his hand, speak in polished tones, smile too widely. Cole kept her at his side. "And this is Hannah," he'd say simply. "Not my date. Not my guest." Just her name spoken with a softness that felt like belonging. For a while, she almost believed she could breathe. Almost. Then Cole was pulled away just for a moment by a donor he couldn't politely refuse. "I'll be right back," he murmured. She nodded, lifting a glass of sparkling water. She didn't wander, didn't mingle, didn't move more than 3 steps. She just stood near a flower arrangement, watching the lights reflect off crystal. That's when she heard them. 2 women stood behind her, perfect hair, perfect gowns, perfect ability to cut someone down without raising their voices. "Did you see the one he brought tonight?" "Oh, I know, that dress? Honey, I wore something like that to my nephew's graduation." "And her job, what was it? Local maintenance staff?" A low chuckle. "Sweet of Cole, really." Every charity event needs a good deed. Hannah's stomach clenched. The other woman leaned in, voice dropping to a cruel whisper that carried anyway. "If you ask me, she's a middle-aged virgin charity case. He'll grow bored." Potaplida. The word virgin hit her like a slap. Cold, exposed, weaponized. Her breath stuttered. The room tilted too bright, too polished, too full of eyes she suddenly imagined, all turning toward her. She set her glass down, slowly, carefully, like it might shatter in her hand if she didn't. Without looking back, she slipped through a break in the crowd and headed for the side hallway. Her pulse thundered. Her throat felt too tight to swallow. Laughter from the ballroom crackled behind her, sharp as broken glass. She didn't care where she was going. She just needed distance, air, an exit. The hallway was dimmer, quieter. Carpet muffled her footsteps. Her vision blurred with humiliation she couldn't hide. She reached for the door to the coat check. "Hannah?" Cole's voice cut through the hallway. Firm. Concerned. She froze. The blood in her veins felt suddenly loud. He stepped closer, confusion tightening his features. "Where are you going?" "What happened?" She kept walking, because if she stopped, if she looked at him, she knew the hurt in her eyes would be too visible, too raw. She pushed the door open, needing the dark behind it. Behind her, his voice softened in a way that made her chest ache. "Hannah, please." She didn't turn. The door clicked shut between them. And we cut? Cole wasn't gone long, 5, maybe 6 minutes. Just long enough to politely redirect the donor conversation he'd been trapped in. Just long enough for the jazz band to shift into a slower tempo. Just long enough for him to smile once more at a face he barely registered. Then he turned, and Hannah wasn't there. Her glass sat on the table exactly where she'd left it, half full. The kind of stillness that said she hadn't planned to walk away, she'd fled. A pulse of unease moved up his spine. He scanned the ballroom, crowds shifting, gowns glittering, voices blending into a low, polished hum. But there was no navy dress, no dark hair, no steady presence he'd grown attuned to in ways that surprised even him. Then he heard it. Not Hannah's voice. Theirs. The 2 women near the floral arrangement. Middle-aged virgin charity case. Maintenance staff. He didn't hear the rest. His body moved before the thought formed. When he reached them, he didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Ladies?" The word cut sharper than any shout. Both women turned, startled upright like schoolgirls caught passing cruel notes. "Mr. Harrington," one stammered. I heard exactly what you were doing, Cole said, voice low, controlled, and cold enough to frost the edge of his glass. A few nearby guests went still. Conversations dipped. People sensed a shift in the air. Cole looked from one woman to the other, gaze unwavering. I don't care what circles you came from, he said quietly. I don't care what you think grants you the right to diminish someone else. But if you speak about Hannah Miller like that again, you will be unwelcome at any event my company sponsors. Their faces drained of color. A ripple moved through the ballroom staff looking up. Donors pausing mid-sentence. Cole continued, tone like steel wrapped in satin. Her character, courage, and honesty outrank every dollar in this room. One of the women swallowed. We didn't mean. You meant every word, he said, and you were wrong. The other sputtered something like an apology, but he didn't wait for it to finish. He'd already turned away. He didn't say goodbye to the donors, didn't signal to the band, didn't acknowledge his assistant, rushing toward him with a panicked whisper. Cole, wait, the mayor just arrived, Cole. He kept walking, straight through the ballroom, past the valet stand, through the glass doors into the cold night air. The moment he stepped outside, he spotted her car. Her old Corolla sat near the edge of the lot, tucked under a flickering street lamp. Inside, Hannah gripped the steering wheel like it was the last solid thing left in her world. He walked toward her slow, intentional, giving her several steps of warning, but she didn't look up. He tapped the window gently. She jumped, then exhaled shakily and unlocked the doors. Without asking, he got in the passenger seat. The interior smelled faintly of lavender and dust from her toolkit. A pair of work gloves lay on the floorboard. Her purse sat open in the back seat. She didn't look at him. He waited. The silence stretched until it thinned into something painful. Then, finally, this, she said, voice trembling, is exactly what I was afraid of. He turned toward her. Hannah, no. She held up a hand, still staring straight ahead. Don't talk yet. Just let me say this. He closed his mouth. Her voice shook, but the words cut clean. I am not your project, Cole. His breath hitched. She swallowed hard. And I am not your rebellion against rich people. I'm not your statement piece. I'm not a symbol of authenticity you parade around to make a point. He flinched, not visibly, not dramatically, just a small shift in the line of his jaw. That's not what you are, he said quietly. Then what am I? She snapped, finally turning to him. Her eyes were glassy but fierce. Because right now, it sure feels like I'm the storm you chose to walk into, without asking if I wanted the lightning with it. He didn't speak immediately. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because the words he'd been avoiding all this time suddenly felt impossible to contain. You're the first real thing in my life in a long time, he said softly. Her breath faltered. I didn't defend you to make a statement, he added. I defended you because what they said was cruel and wrong. And because you deserved someone to stand up for you. She pressed her forehead to her hands. Cole, I can't be the woman everyone whispers about. I can't survive that. I. You won't have to, he said. I'll handle it. That's the problem, she whispered. You handling things means attention. It means noise. It means I become the story. He opened his mouth, then closed it. She was right, and it hurt more than he expected. She wiped at her cheek with the back of her hand. He waited. Space, she whispered. Something inside him dropped. Okay, he said. Not because he wanted to, but because loving someone meant giving them room, even when your whole chest felt too tight to breathe. She put the car in reverse. He didn't reach for her, didn't beg, didn't push. He just murmured one last thing, so soft, she almost didn't hear it. I'll be here when the space isn't so loud. Her hands shook on the wheel. She drove off. The taillights vanished down the dark street, leaving Cole standing alone in the parking lot, Tuck's jacket slung over one shoulder, tie hanging loose, the evening wind sweeping around him like a quiet verdict. The days that followed the gala were strangely quiet. Too quiet. No texts. No unexpected stairwell encounters. No gentle check-ins disguised as casual hallway greetings. Cole respected the space she asked for, and Hannah hated how much she missed him for it. She tried to throw herself into work, climbing ladders, inspecting air filters, fixing a jammed utility door on the 12th floor. But every time she caught her reflection in a metal panel, she saw the same look in her eyes: avoidance, fear, a hollow ache she didn't want to name. So she turned her focus elsewhere, where she'd always turned it: home. Her father, Ray Miller, had been having more bad days lately, forgetting conversations before they ended, asking for her mother, gone 17 years now, calling Lily the nurse instead of by name. That Tuesday afternoon, she made him a grilled cheese and tomato soup, the way he liked it when the world felt fuzzy to him. She left him watching televised baseball reruns while she stepped outside to fix a loose gutter. She was only gone 15 minutes. When she came back inside, the living room was empty. The back door was open, her chest locked. "Dad?" No answer. She ran to the front porch. Nothing. Up the street, empty. Her breath started to shake. Then a neighbor, Mr. Kelly, waved frantically from half a block away. "Hannah!" He fell, called an ambulance. She sprinted. There, on the sidewalk near the curb, Ray lay on his side, pale, confused, clutching his hip with a grimace of pain. EMTs knelt beside him, checking vitals. He wandered, Mr. Kelly said, worry etched deep in his voice. Didn't seem to know where he was. Hannah knelt, grabbing her father's hand. "Dad? Dad, I'm here." He blinked up at her, eyes cloudy. "Helen?" Calling her by her mother's name. Her heart shattered. The EMTs lifted him onto the stretcher. Possible hip fracture. "We're taking him to Good Samaritan." "I'm coming with you," she said immediately. But the ambulance was full, so she followed in her car, her hands shaking the whole way. Across town, at Harrington Dynamics, the atmosphere couldn't have been more different. Cole sat in the glass conference room on the 34th floor, a long table of suits, screens full of charts, and investors whose patience cost more than some people's annual salaries. He tried to focus. He really did, but the words blurred. Numbers swam. Everything felt painfully, pointlessly hollow. Still, he kept his face composed. Hands folded. Tie straight. CEO mask locked in place. Until movement outside the conference room caught his eye. Through the tinted glass, he saw Hannah's supervisor speaking urgently to building security. Gestures sharp and worried. The words didn't carry, but fragments reached him anyway when the door opened briefly. Hannah's dad. Ambulance? Good Samaritan. A cold jolt shot through him. He didn't think. Didn't weigh pros and cons. Didn't remember the line he'd promised to keep between them. He just stood. In the middle of a high-stakes financial presentation, several investors paused mid-sentence. "Mr. Harrington?" one asked, confused. Cole grabbed his coat. His voice was steady, but firm enough to slice through the tension. "I need to go. Right now. But, sir, we have projections. Could we just—" "No," he said. "Cancel the rest of the day." "But—" "Cancel everything." The assistant stared at him, stunned. No one canceled a meeting with these investors. No one walked out. No one left the table, except him. He didn't look back. Good Samaritan Hospital smelled like antiseptic and stress-bright lights, hurried footsteps, the low murmur of worry humming through every hallway. Hannah sat in the waiting room, hair messy from the wind, still wearing her work shirt stained with grease and dust. She clutched her father's old leather wallet so tightly the edges dug into her palms. She stared at the floor, blinking back tears she refused to let fall. The automatic doors slid open behind her. She didn't look up. Not until she heard footsteps measured, familiar, too familiar. When he stopped a few feet away, she finally raised her eyes. Cole stood there, breath slightly unsteady from having rushed through the parking structure. Coat half-buttoned, tie crooked like he'd left in the middle of something important. "You shouldn't be here," she whispered immediately, voice rough. He didn't move closer. Just stayed where he was, as if he knew the wrong kind of nearness might tip her over the edge. "There's nowhere else I'd rather be," he said quietly. Her throat constricted. "Cole, this is my family, my crisis, my life." "I know," he said, "and I'm not here to take over. I'm just here." So you're not alone. A tear escaped despite her best effort. She swiped it away quickly, frustrated with herself. You can't just leave work for me, she said. People will talk. They already do, he said simply. And I don't care. Well, I do, she whispered. He nodded once, accepting the truth without argument. Then, I'll sit over here, he said softly, gesturing to an empty chair a respectful distance away. He didn't wait for an answer, didn't assume one either. He just sat, hands clasped, shoulders slightly curled, a man trying to give presence without pressure. She watched him for a long time. The hospital intercom buzzed overhead. A nurse rolled a monitor past them. A child cried somewhere down the hallway. And there he sat, silent, steady, unexpectedly human. Not CEO, not savior, not a spotlight she had to survive. Just someone who came when life broke open. Hannah's grip on her father's wallet loosened not much, but enough for her fingers to stop trembling. The waiting room felt a little less cold, not safe, not resolved, not easy, but less alone. She wasn't ready to reach for his hand. Not yet, but for the first time in days, she didn't feel like driving away. Hospitals have a way of stretching time, making every minute feel like an hour, every hour like a night. Good Samaritan was no exception. The waiting room was nearly empty now, just a quiet hum under the fluorescent lights. Hannah sat hunched in a hard plastic chair, hands cupped around a paper cup of bitter vending machine coffee she hadn't taken a sip of, the edges crumpled beneath her fingers. Cole sat a seat away, close enough to be there, far enough not to corner her. He'd been there for hours, never checking his phone, never pacing, just waiting with her as if he had nowhere else on earth to be. A nurse eventually stopped by with a quick update. Ray was in surgery, stable so far, but it would take time. Then she walked away, leaving behind a deeper silence than before. Hannah let out a long, shaky breath. You really don't have to stay. Hannah Lote. Cole's voice came low and steady. I know. Another pause. Then why are you? She whispered. He looked at her carefully, as if choosing each word before letting it go. Because people shouldn't sit with fear alone. Her throat tightened. She stared at the cup, twisting it slowly. She was too tired to argue, too drained to keep her armor straight. The exhaustion of the entire week, maybe the entire year, pulled at her shoulders. She whispered, almost to herself, I'm not just afraid of all the intimacy stuff. Cole didn't move, didn't interrupt, just waited. I'm afraid, she continued, voice cracking, of belonging to someone, of depending on someone, of waking up one day and finding out they're just gone. Her eyes watered, and she blinked hard. I lost my mom so fast. One day she was laughing in the kitchen, and the next she wasn't breathing. I was 21. There was no warning, no goodbye. Just empty space where she used to be. Her breath shook. And then with my dad slipping away inch by inch, some mornings, not knowing my name, I feel like I've been losing people my entire adult life. Cole's jaw tightened gently, not in frustration but in empathy. A quiet ache passed through his expression. I figured, she whispered, if I never belonged to anyone, if I never let myself get that close, then maybe I'd never have to feel that kind of loss again. She looked down at her hands, knuckles white. People think I'm prudish, or sheltered, or religious. But it's not that. It's that I don't know if my heart could survive one more goodbye. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she exhaled, a deeper sigh, one that came from a place she rarely touched. She wiped her cheek quickly. In college, my roommate was assaulted after a party. I wasn't with her that night because I had a late shift. She had asked me to go with her twice. I told her I'd meet her later. I never made it. Her voice broke. Maybe it wouldn't have happened. Maybe she wouldn't have been alone when she needed someone. She pressed her palms into her eyes. So intimacy, it's never felt simple or sweet or natural to me. It felt like a door I shouldn't open. Like stepping inside meant stepping into a place I couldn't protect myself. The confession hung in the air, raw, trembling, honest in a way she'd never allowed herself to be with anyone. Cole's breath left him slowly. He looked down at his hands, fingers interlocking, then unlocking, then folding again. It was rare to see him unsettled, but he was. "Hannah," he said softly, "I've got something I've never said out loud either." She looked up, surprised. He stared ahead at the blank hospital wall, voice dropping to a hushed, painful tone. "The night my brother died, he called me 3 times. 3. His throat tightened, the memory clearly a wound he kept buried deep. I ignored the calls because I was in a critical meeting. He let out a humorless breath. A meeting, all those people in suits talking about quarterly projections. That's where I was while he was dying. His fingers curled slowly against his knees. I didn't even call back. By the time I checked my voicemail, it was already too late. Silence. Thick. Weighted. I keep thinking," he whispered, "if I had just stepped away for 2 minutes, if I had cared more, if I had put him first just once, he might still be here." Hannah's breath hitched, the pain in his voice piercing something inside her. He swallowed hard. "So yeah. I'm scared too. Scared of failing someone again. Scared of caring deeply and not being enough when it matters." He turned his head slightly toward her, just enough to meet her eyes, not enough to overwhelm her. "And if we ever build something together," he said, voice unsteady for the first time since she'd met him, "it won't be because I'm trying to fix you, or because you're trying to fix me." He drew a quiet breath. Eyes locked on hers, with a sincerity that felt like truth itself. "It'll be because we both know we're cracked," he continued, "and we choose to hold each other carefully." Hannah didn't have words. Not one. Whatever shield she'd been gripping slipped from her fingers. Slowly, tentatively, she leaned sideways. Just a few inches. Not collapsing, not clinging, just resting. Her head brushed against his shoulder. Cole froze, then exhaled the gentlest breath and stayed perfectly still, as if afraid to disturb the fragile peace she'd finally allowed. They didn't speak again, and for the first time in years, Hannah let herself lean into someone without planning her escape. Recovery rooms always smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm blankets, 2 scents that shouldn't go together, yet somehow did. Ray Miller had been moved to a quieter wing, the kind where afternoon light filtered through cheap blinds and cast soft stripes across the tiled floor. It was the 3rd day after surgery when Ray finally stirred with something closer to clarity. Hannah noticed it first. The way his gaze shifted, less fog, more intent. The way his fingers stopped tugging at the blanket and instead rested calmly against it. She'd learned to read these micro-changes the way children read the sky for weather. "Dad?" she whispered, leaning in. Ray blinked twice, then focused on her. Really focused. "You look tired, sweetheart," he murmured, voice thin but steady. "Too tired." She gave a small smile. "Long week." He hummed a soft, familiar, fatherly sound, and his eyes drifted past her shoulder toward the doorway. Cole stood there, not imposing, not too close, hands in his coat pockets, posture quiet, like he was afraid to take up space that wasn't his. His suit jacket was still on from the office, though the lapels were slightly wrinkled from the long hours he'd spent half asleep in waiting room chairs. Ray's gaze lingered on him for a moment, not confused but curious, measuring something only he could see. Then he looked back at Hannah. "Is he?" He hesitated, brow furrowing gently. "Is he the man from the elevator story?" Hannah froze so completely she forgot to breathe. Weeks ago, on one of Ray's better afternoons, he'd asked her to tell something funny, something to distract him from the muddle of his thoughts. She'd told a light, harmless version of the elevator incident. No confessions, no heartbreak. Just a clumsy building coordinator getting stuck with a fancy tenant. She never imagined he'd remember. She especially never imagined he'd connect the dots. "Yeah, Dad," she whispered softly. "That's him." Ray nodded slowly, like he'd been expecting that answer all along. He lifted a hand, weak but purposeful, and gestured for Cole to come closer. Cole hesitated, almost imperceptibly. But when Hannah gave a tiny nod, he stepped forward, stopping at the side of the bed. Ray reached out. Cole instinctively reached back, wrapping his much larger hand around Ray's frail one. What happened next was so unexpected, so quietly profound, that Hannah felt her pulse tumble. Ray's voice, though thin, carried a gravity that came from decades of being a father, one who had known love, loss, mistakes, and hard-won tenderness. "Don't hurt my girl," he whispered. Cole blinked. The words hit him like a storm he hadn't braced for. Ray tightened his grip, slightly surprising strength from a man who earlier had forgotten what month it was. She deserved better than what life gave her the first time around. Hannah swallowed hard. She knew exactly what he meant. Losing her mother, the ex-fiancé who chipped away at her confidence. Years of putting everyone else first, until she forgot what it meant to want something for herself. Cole didn't break eye contact with Ray. Not once. When he spoke, his voice was unexpectedly thick, like it had to push past something lodged deep in his chest. "I know," he said quietly, "and I don't intend to be another chapter of not enough. Not enough." Ray nodded, satisfied. A father's blessing in the simplest, rawest form. Hannah had to look away for a moment. The sight of the two of them, her father, fragile but clear, Cole, steady but moved, brought a sting to her eyes that felt like release. After a long moment, Ray's hand slipped back to the blanket, exhaustion pulling at him again. His eyelids drooped, but just before sleep took him, he murmured, "You? Both. Be gentle." The words hung in the room like a prayer. When Ray drifted off, the quiet felt different, less heavy, more sacred. Cole stepped back toward the doorway, giving Hannah space. But she didn't move away from him this time. She stood beside the bed, arms folded lightly, absorbing everything that had just happened. After a moment, she turned her head slightly. Cole stood there staring at the linoleum floor, as if grounding himself. "That meant something to you," she said softly. He didn't look up. "Yes." The simplicity of the answer touched her more than anything. For a man who spoke in measured, controlled tones, who calculated risks, outcomes, and consequences for a living, his honesty was like a door left open just for her. "I didn't expect," Hannah began, but her voice trailed off. There was too much she didn't have words for. Cole finally lifted his gaze. The look he gave her wasn't intense or demanding. It wasn't romantic, either. It was human. Deeply, profoundly human. "I'm not trying to take over your life," he said quietly. "And I'm not trying to rush you. I just want to be where you are, when you let me." Hannah's breath caught not from fear this time, but from something gentler, almost like recognition. She didn't step into his arms. She didn't reach for him, but her shoulders softened, and the tension she'd been holding for weeks slipped just a little. It was the kind of shift no one else in the world would have noticed. Cole did. He always did. And for the first time, she let herself wonder what it might feel like to stop holding on so tightly to her solitude. Not to surrender it, just to share a corner of it. The room hummed softly with machines and the muted buzz of hospital life. But between the two of them, something quieter unfolded. Not romance, not comfort, something in between. Something like trust beginning to take shape. And then, from the hallway, a voice called Hannah's name, pulling her attention away, leaving the moment suspended, unfinished. Not closed, just paused. Waiting. It was nearly 6 in the evening when the last of the seniors shuffled out of the community center gym. Jackets zipped, walkers folded, goodbyes echoing off the high ceiling. Fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead, casting long shadows across the scuffed hardwood floors. The place always felt gentler after hours quiet in a way the world rarely allowed. Hannah finished stacking the folding chairs, her breath visible in the cool March air drifting through the propped-open exit doors. She'd taken the new position 2 weeks earlier, managing a smaller facilities site across town. More responsibility. Fewer politics. A fresh start. More importantly, it created space. Space to think clearly. Space to feel without pressure. Space to identify what she actually wanted instead of reacting to what scared her. She wiped her hands on her jeans when she heard the front door open. She didn't have to turn around to know who it was. There was something unmistakable about the soft, measured rhythm of Cole's footsteps, calm, unhurried, as if he approached the world with intentionality instead of ownership. When he stepped into the gym, he paused a respectful distance away. No assumption. No claim. Just presence. "You said to stop by around now," he said gently, voice echoing just enough to soften the edges. Hannah nodded. Yeah. He looked around the empty room. She gave a small smile. That's a polite way to describe a building with a 15-year-old heating system. He smiled back, but his eyes were searching not for answers, but for openness, for readiness, for whatever came next. Did you settle in at the new job? He asked. I did, she said, exhaling. It's calmer and quieter. He nodded once, understanding exactly what she meant, exactly what she didn't have to explain. The silence that followed wasn't tense, just full. Like they'd finally reached a point in the road where neither could keep walking around the things sitting between them. Cole took a breath, stepped slightly closer. There's something I want to be very clear about. Hannah tensed slightly, not from fear, but from the familiarity of bracing herself. Years of doing that made it automatic, he noticed. He softened his tone. I'm not here, he said, to restart a relationship you weren't ready for. Her throat tightened. And I'm not here to ask you for anything, he continued. Not labels, not timelines, not promises. He looked at her the way he'd looked at Ray in the hospital, steady, sincere, unvarnished. I don't need a public relationship, he said. He took another small step, slow enough that she had time to breathe. I just want, he said quietly, to walk beside you. In whatever direction you choose. Something inside her, something tight and coiled, loosened just a little. She set down the folding chair in her hands. Why? She whispered. His answer came without hesitation. Because I think you're worth knowing, he said simply. And I'm willing to go as slow as you need, to feel safe knowing me back. The room stayed very still. Hannah felt her pulse in her throat, her wrists, the tips of her fingers. She'd spent so many years learning to shut doors gently but firmly to avoid the ache of losing someone by never letting anyone in. But in the weeks since the hospital night, something had shifted quietly, subtly, but undeniably. She found herself thinking of him at odd moments, the way he looked at her father with reverence, the way he didn't flinch when she spoke of fear, the way he stayed even when she kept her distance. Fear still lived in her, but so did something new, something like possibility. She realized he was waiting, not holding his breath, not reaching for her, just waiting. After a long moment, she stepped toward him. One small step. But for her, it felt like crossing a bridge she'd built plank by trembling plank. I can't promise, she said quietly. His expression softened, something warm settling behind his eyes. And I can't promise, she continued, that I'll always know how to talk about it when I am. She exhaled, steadying herself. But I can promise this. I won't run the first time. Fear shows up. I won't disappear. Not this time. Cole's breath caught for just a second, but enough that she noticed. She wasn't done. And, if I'm being honest, she swallowed. I want to stop standing in the doorway of my own life. The honesty sat between them, quiet, brave, imperfect, real. Then she closed the remaining space between them. She lifted her hand, hesitated once, then gently touched his cheek. He didn't lean in. He didn't close the distance for her. He let her choose. And she did. Hannah leaned up, meeting him with a soft kiss, slow, deliberate, not the clumsy collision of impulse, but the careful opening of a door she had kept locked for years. There was no urgency, no hunger, only warmth, only trust. Only the quiet miracle of choosing instead of retreating. When she pulled back, Cole didn't speak. He just looked at her with a tenderness that felt like a promise without words. That's my yes, she said softly. Not to everything, but to the next step. He nodded, breath unsteady. Then that's all I'll take. Outside, the night deepened. Inside, something finally began. But before either of them could speak again, the center's hallway lights flickered, pulling both of them back to the present moment, leaving the future suspended in the quiet space between breaths. Not decided, just unfolding. The scent of charcoal and sizzling burgers drifted across the small rented backyard, mixing with the sweetness of early summer. Fireflies blinked lazily near the fence. Laughter rose and fell like a familiar song. Hannah carried a bowl of potato salad to the old picnic table she'd bought from a neighbor for $20. Lily and her husband were already there, arranging paper plates, teasing each other about who burned the hot dog buns last 4th of July. A couple of neighbors had wandered over with sweet tea and store-bought cookies, the way people in modest neighborhoods did, unannounced but always welcome. Ray sat in his wheelchair under the shade of the maple tree, a quilt tucked over his knees, even though the evening was warm. His memory drifted these days, but tonight was a good night, his eyes clear, his smile easy. And at the grill stood Cole, in jeans, a plain gray t-shirt, smoke curling around him as he flipped burgers with an authority he absolutely did not have. "You're pressing them too hard," Ray called out. "You're squeezing the juice out." Cole pointed the spatula at him. "You told me last time to press them so they'd cook evenly." Ray chuckled. Everyone laughed. Hannah set the bowl down and watched the two men banter the wealthy CEO and her retired, dementia-fading father. A year ago, she wouldn't have believed they could exist in the same frame of her life. Now they looked almost inevitable, like two chapters that were always meant to meet eventually. She went to help Lily slice tomatoes, and Lily leaned in with a grin. "Girl, he looks at you like the sun rises out of your coffee mug." Hannah nudged her. "Stop. It's not a wedding yet," Lily whispered, "but it feels like a life." Hannah didn't answer, but her chest warmed. Not with fantasy, with recognition. The evening settled into a quiet contentment, Ray telling the same joke twice, neighbors complimenting Cole's overcooked but enthusiastic grilling, Lily dragging her husband into an impromptu cornhole game. Everything was imperfect. Everything was real. As dusk deepened, someone lit citronella candles. The golden glow brushed against faces, softened edges, made the whole yard feel like a memory already forming. Later, after the guests had left and Ray had dozed off in his wheelchair, Hannah and Cole drove him back to the hospital for a routine post-surgery check. They navigated the quiet halls together, the smell of disinfectant somehow familiar now rather than intimidating. Ray was taken to an exam room, and a nurse told them it would be a short wait. An elevator dinged. "Come on," Hannah said softly. "Let's grab a soda from downstairs." They stepped inside the elevator together, just the two of them. A full year since the night everything began. The doors slid closed. Halfway down, the elevator gave a tiny, harmless shudder. Barely noticeable. They both felt it. They both smirked. Cole raised an eyebrow. "Déjà vu?" Hannah squeezed his hand gently, the gesture easy now, unforced. "You know," she said, "if someone had told me a stuck elevator and the most embarrassing confession of my life would lead to this." His eyes warmed. "Yes? I'd have taken the stairs," she deadpanned. He burst into a soft laugh, a sound she'd grown to love because it was rare and unguarded. It echoed gently off the metal walls. A small, private joy. When he caught his breath, he squeezed her hand back. "Well," he said, "I'm glad the elevator had other plans." She leaned her head lightly on his shoulder, no hesitation, no apology, just belonging in its simplest form. The elevator hummed, descending steadily. And as it did, a quiet narration unfolded inside her. One she wouldn't speak aloud, but one she finally understood. Sometimes the moment you feel the most ashamed, the moment you want the floor to swallow you whole, is the moment life finally sees you clearly. Sometimes a powerful man cancels every meeting on his calendar, not to be a hero, not to prove anything, but because something inside him finally wakes up enough to show up as a human being. And sometimes, the slowest love, the one without pressure, without hurry, the love that sits beside you in hospital waiting rooms and gives you time to breathe, is the love that heals the deepest wounds. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Cole offered his hand. This time, she took it without thinking. They stepped out together, not into a fairy tale, not into a grand future, but into an ordinary hallway, on an ordinary night. And somehow, that felt extraordinary. A life built not on fireworks, but on the quiet courage of two people choosing each other daily, gently, at their own pace. Sometimes, healing begins where we least expect it, in the quiet moments, in the embarrassing moments, even in the ones we wish we could rewrite. Hannah thought her greatest shame was something that made her unlovable. Cole believed his success couldn't cover the places where he had failed. Yet, somehow, the very cracks they tried to hide became the places where something honest could finally grow. Love, the real kind, isn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It's about two people choosing to show up with fear, with history, with hesitation, and still letting themselves be seen. It's about patience that doesn't demand, presence that doesn't overpower, and gentleness that doesn't rush your healing. And maybe that's the quiet beauty of their story, that an ordinary elevator, a bad day, and a fragile confession turned into a doorway toward something steady and true. A reminder that we're not defined by the moments that break us, but by the courage it takes to open our hearts again. Even just a little. Thank you for being here with us and for spending a piece of your day listening to this story. Your presence means more than you know. Every like, every share, every subscribe isn't just support for the channel. It's a way of spreading a little more kindness, a little more understanding into a world that desperately needs it. Thank you for helping us tell stories that touch the soul, and for being part of this gentle corner of the internet where hearts can breathe again.